PanTech Chronicles, Book 1, Shadowfalcon, written by F. Lockhaven and M. A. Owens. Chapter 1. I began to open my eyes reluctantly before changing my mind and tightening them shut again. Normally, I'd leap from my bed the moment consciousness became mine, but last night, unlike most nights, my dream had been something pleasant. When this happened, I liked to lie still and hope to fall back into it again, picking up where I left off. Not an exciting, action-packed adventure, or a romantic getaway with my dream guy, or counting my limitless wealth. No. In this dream, I was in a world alone. I rested on the baking hot sands outside my village, no bloodthirsty insects swarming my body to shower me in stings and bites, no shouts to take me from.
Taylor, what are you doing? Get up! Your brother is already packed and ready.
The shout echoed both inside and outside of my mind. My beautiful mother stood over me when I wrenched apart my eyelids to look up at her. Well, beautiful on the outside at least, with her jet-black hair, narrow brown eyes, and skin far too pale to be suited for the desert. Her hair and her heart matched, I think, but I dare not say so.
I'm up. It's the first time I've overslept in months, so cut me a break, huh?
I protested, though realizing I'd used up pointless oxygen in doing so no sooner than I'd finished the sentence.
You haven't slept in. Your brother's just up early since he cares about making a good impression on others. You know that our guests are due any day now.
She shoved her hand in my hair, her fingers getting stuck after just a few inches of brushing through.
You've been gifted with beauty, the best of both your father and I, and you can't even be bothered to take care of your hair.
She pushed my head away roughly.
Right, gotta look pretty for digging up terror ants and stitching up wounded pets. Thanks, Mother.
She frowned a deep, harsh frown that made her forehead wrinkle.
You never know who will walk by or whose eye you'll catch when you return or whose pet you're treating. If you fail your exam and get stuck here, your first goal should be to marry well.
I tensed. I'd gotten to hear this lecture several times a week for the past few years, and since I'd turned 17, almost every day. To say I was sick of it would be an understatement. At 17, I was already our village's veterinarian. I'd become an apprentice at 14 and should have studied for 10 years, but my teacher died suddenly of a stroke a few months ago, leaving me to take over, and the apprentice who'd started a year later than me, Kara, to become my apprentice. I could take care of myself. At one time, my father had been a renowned inventor and teacher, but our guests, as Mother liked to call them, had put a stop to that. His inventions interfered with our village's adversity rating because they made everyone's lives easier, and he was warned that if he continued, they would have to raise the threshold for passing the exams, something our guests came by to administer yearly and allowed every 18-year-old the opportunity to be selected for service by PanTech and leave the adversity zone. Father became more and more bitter. It was hard to be around him nowadays. Even the most minor accident would send him into a tirade of expletives and combinations of expletives. Sometimes new ones, as though he was determined to at least be able to continue inventing something.
Okay.
I said to my mother, taking a deep breath.
I'll comb my hair. Now, could I have some privacy? I'd like to get dressed so my dear brother doesn't have to keep waiting.
I felt a tinge of guilt hit me the moment I finished the sentence. It was meant to be a sarcastic remark to irritate Mother, but my brother had always been good to me, better than anyone else had at least, even though he was a fool and a coward without equal. Well, except for maybe Mother, with her guests, and we should be thankful, and all of her phrases that made Father's face contort into shapes that might resemble a volcano if it were trying desperately not to erupt, despite desperately wanting to, if volcanoes were human, I guess.
Good. Maybe try speaking a bit more ladylike, too. I know you think you're above it because you've been lucky in life, but if you are fortunate enough to experience greater adversity, your beauty and your manners may be all you have. Sharpen them while you can.
I rubbed my forehead, wondering if my face was taking on the strange, furious, involuntary shapes my father's did when she said things like this to him. I hoped I had better self-control than he did in that respect.
You're right, of course. Thank you for your advice.
I opened the door, encouraging her to leave as politely, but as quickly as I thought she'd let me away with. Thankfully, it worked. She sighed, nodded to me, and stepped quickly through the door, which I promptly closed behind her, calling up every ounce of my will not to slam it so hard it exploded into 10,000 splinters. At least, that's what I imagined it would do if I could manage to convert my irritation directly into physical strength. Closing the door left me staring into the mirror that hung from it, cracked, from the times I hadn't been able to summon that willpower. Maybe I'd inherited my temperament from my father, the way my brother did from our mother. I'd inherited his dark skin as well, but unfortunately not his hair and eyes. Every time I looked into this mirror, I saw a darker-skinned version of Mother, looking back at me and judging me for being such a disappointment. I'm not sure why I cared. Would Mother really be happy if I put on makeup, spent an hour brushing my hair, and walked around town pretending to struggle with carrying some tiny something until a handsome, rich boy tore it from my hands, steadied me on my feet, and kissed me deeply before promising I'd never want for anything ever again? My cheeks warmed a little at the thought, but I snapped back into reality, scolding myself for getting caught up in the scene that played out in my mind. Stupid imaginary handsome stranger and his perfect kissing technique, muscled arms, and long wavy hair blowing in the desert wind. Grrr! I'll punch him in the face if I ever see him. Maybe. I shook my head violently and slammed my open hands into my cheeks. Pull it together, Taylor. I threw open my closet doors. My tiny wardrobe of highly practical and very unladylike outfits filled the tiny space, including the very unpretty one I designed to slow down a terror ant attack in the case that my latest technique of harvesting their hives didn't work or didn't work well enough. It was more of a psychological trick I played on myself than anything else. After all, it only took a few terror ant bites to leave you hunched over a bucket, for days heaving out your guts, and wishing your mother had never given birth to you in the first place, or that you could at least swap pains with her in the process. There was nothing quite like a terror ant bite. I was tempted to describe it as a hot nail being driven into the skin, but that would stop hurting after a few moments, whereas the terror ant's bite didn't for days. The tingling and numbness lasted weeks, sometimes months in older bite victims. The lucky ones, that is. More than a few bites would land you in the grave. Your hollow bones, at least. They made quick work of everything else. I had to give my brother credit for being willing to go out and do this with me. Bravery and stupidity are siblings, my father used to say. It ended up being an ironic statement in his case. I threw on the outfit and flung open my door before realizing I had forgotten to comb my hair. I quickly closed it again and spent the next few seconds brushing my comb through my hair painfully, completely disregarding the proper technique my mother showed me. I didn't have all morning after all. Correction, the morning was all I had. Once it became light out, the terror ants were more active, and this would be suicide. It could be regardless, but we could at least take the proper precautions to put the odds in our favor. A terror ant hive was such a delicacy to PanTech's proper citizens that it could supply my clinic and feed my family for weeks. Apparently, you could only find them here, or so I guessed. It's not like we knew anything about the other adversity zones, or how many there were. We assumed that there must be several, considering we didn't recognize any of the employees who came by to check in our cozy little village, to ensure our adversity level was still optimal. For our own good, of course. My second attempt to leave my room worked out better. Just outside my door, rounding the corner, was the common room where my mother was preparing food. My brother was sitting at the table, a small piece of meat on his plate. He'd remembered my instructions at least. If you ate a full meal while trying to wear these clothes, things would get unbearably tight very quickly. The longest I'd ever been able to wear it when testing it was a few hours, and by then, you're up against prolonged restricted breathing or a heat stroke, both of which were preferred death to terror ant bites.
Thanks for being ready.
I offered.
We'd better get going.
My father's attention was held by a mess of papers on the large wooden table, glancing over them while finishing a long puff on his smoking pipe. preparing the upcoming school year's curriculum in something, I suppose. He was brilliant, so it could have been anything. But, aside from my brother and I, he didn't have the heart to teach anymore.
I still think you're crazy for doing this, Tay, and even crazier for dragging your poor brother along. When you get back, I'll need you to deliver these to the school. I'm nearly done now, so I expect I'll be done with them by then.
He never looked up at us or took his eyes off his papers. He only took another long pull from his pipe and blew out a cloud of smoke that filled the air with a pleasant cactus berry aroma. Father was clever with language. It was frowned upon to offer your children too many kind or encouraging words. It would affect their adversity, after all, to have parents who were too kind. But, in that one simple phrase, implying he expected us to be back soon, what he'd really said was, "You're brave. I believe in you. You'll succeed, and I'll see you soon."
Sure, I'll drop them off on my way to the clinic,
I said.
Ferris, are you ready?
Born ready. Born ready to get this suit off as soon as possible, at least.
Ferris replied, wiggling uncomfortably in his chair. I sighed.
If you're going to start complaining this early, you're going to really love it when we start walking around in them. Or when you have to put the mask on. Or when the first terror ant crawls.
Okay, I get it. Try not to be too grateful. You'll hurt yourself.
His tone said he meant it as an insult, but his smile said the opposite. Only I saw the smile.
All right, you two need to leave. I have work to do,
Father said.
You said you needed the cooler morning air before the sunrise for this to be safest, so you better get going.
Good luck, he was most likely thinking. I took a deep breath, or at least what would have to substitute for a deep breath, grabbed my rucksack with the supplies I needed next to the door, and lit our lantern. I stopped just before opening the door and took a long look around. I was probably crazy for doing this, and who knew what my brother was thinking? The two of us looked at each other. I placed my hand on the door handle for a long moment, my way of offering him one last chance to change his mind. He didn't. We flung open the door and ventured out into the dark, open desert to tempt fate for profit. Chapter 2.
Did we really have to cover ourselves in that nasty-smelling meat grease?
Ferris whispered behind me.
No, I mean, you didn't have to. It would take you all day to get the suit on, and your sweat would attract the ants. Be my guest and try something different next time.
I replied at my normal volume, making no effort to mask my irritation at even being asked such a stupid question.
All right, sheesh. You're the expert. I'm just making conversation.
He whispered, as though he couldn't help himself but be polite, even in the dark when no one else was likely to hear him.
Well,
I started.
you could try asking useful questions, like maybe ask me why I chose to use the grease instead of any one of the many more pleasant oils Mother keeps around the house. You could also ask me why the sugar water line in the sand works to draw them from their nest. You could ask,
You're scared, aren't you? Me too.
He offered, whispering even more quietly this time, his tone softening. He was the only person who could make me angry and remind me why I loved him in the span of a few seconds. Well, aside from Father, when he had one of his verbal tirades, it was hard to tell at a glance that we were brother and sister. His hair was rough, like Father's, and he kept it tied in a tight ponytail. His skin was a softer brown, much closer to Mother's, and he had Father's emerald green eyes. He also had Father's natural affinity for language. If he said the wrong thing, he knew the right thing to say to instantly make it better, no matter who he was speaking to. He hadn't lost his temper and started shouting foul language for all the village to hear. At least, not yet. Maybe that would happen when he got older, like they say it did with Father.
I
started to say in my usual snappy tone I often took with him, that he rarely deserved. I took a breath and started again.
You're right. I'm sorry. I'm a little on edge. And yeah, I'm a little scared. Have you ever seen a body swarmed by terror ants?
Unfortunately. Yeah, I have.
And you still came?
I laughed nervously.
I know you have, and you're still going.
We both went quiet and continued to walk through our dark village by the dim lantern light. We could see not a single toy or a sign that children existed. They were carefully hidden away indoors. I'd heard of some parents going as far as hiding them in the walls or under the floor's stone. Mother forbade them in our house, but Father always found a way to sneak things to us that technically weren't toys. I remembered the first doll he made for me. Anatomy reference, as he called it. You're never too young to study the human body, especially if you may have a future in medicine. Of course, it turned out that I would be interested in medicine, but the doll I just played with in my room. After he'd given me another, I made them talk to each other quietly. I still remember the day Mother caught me by listening through my door and meant to throw them into the fire. Father managed to stop her. He told her it was an exercise he'd given me to simulate human interaction in the role of a physician trying to diagnose a patient. There was no point in facing adversity as a child if you were too uneducated to be of use to PanTech. That was when he still pretended, of course, when he was still trying to appease Mother. Now he rarely did. He'd call PanTech every name in the book and say he didn't care if they executed him, before he'd finally calm down and return to his work as though nothing ever happened. I shook my head vigorously, flinging the thoughts from my mind. The last thing I needed was for my head to be in the clouds.
I use the grease from rotten meat because the stench slows down the ants. They like sweat and sweet smells. Sweat is how they target their prey. They aren't scavengers, so if you smell rotten, they think twice before swarming you. It buys you a little time if you rile them up. Not long. A few seconds at best before they do. Whatever it is they do to determine you are, in fact, alive and swarm you anyway. I've tested this with animal carcasses. Sometimes they hesitate as long as 5 seconds, and of course these suits are too tight to get into otherwise.
Ah, right, that makes sense. That explains the sugar water too.
Ferris said, in his normal voice. I assume, accidentally. He snapped his head around quickly to make sure no one had heard him and might be upset that he had disturbed them. This is something I did not like about my brother. He was good at making everyone like him, but he cared far too much about whether or not they did.
See, you're getting it. Now we just have to not die. I saw a hive not far from here, just out of sight of the village that needed to be dealt with anyway. Do you remember how to put the rest on?
He started to twist to see inside his pack, but realized he wouldn't easily be able to, and just swung the pack around in front of him instead. He pilfered through it a moment.
Gloves, mask, wraps to cover the gaps. We're going to roast in these, Taylor.
I nodded.
Yep, if we drag our feet,
I said, slowing my pace.
it should be around here somewhere. We have to be careful not to get too close. We need to stop just at the edge of the lantern light.
I wished now that I'd practiced more with spotting these in the dark by dim light. If we accidentally stepped on a hive, we'd be dead by the time we realized the ants bit us. Figures I'd overlook a detail that important.
We have to be getting close.
I said. Now I was the one whispering.
We're taking baby steps from here on out. Help me look for them. There's usually 1 or 2 nearby, even at night.
I squinted and looked side to side as I walked, mere inches with each step.
I don't see anything yet.
Suddenly, Ferris grabbed my arm hard. I turned to see what had alarmed him, but he didn't speak. He only pointed. I followed his finger's direction and saw one of the little demons crawling just at the edge of the light.
We'll put our hat and gloves on. You go first. I'll watch it. They never spend more than a few minutes out of the hive before switching guard with a new ant.
Got it.
He opened his pack, pulled out the gloves, and began working them on, taping them up at the small overlap at the wrist, before struggling several minutes with the hat.
Nice thinking with the mesh hood. I'm not sure how we could get bit through this thick leather either.
Don't be so sure,
I said.
Keep an eye on it.
Once I completed my suit, I took one more look up to the sky. Good, still pitch dark.
Over there.
He said, pointing a few feet from where I'd last seen the ant.
I saw it crawl into the hive over there, after another crawled out.
I dropped my pack on the ground, pulling out 2 small clay bowls and a large bottle filled with sugar water.
Stay here.
I whispered.
I have to isolate that one quickly. Get the shovel ready. Remember, right along the lines of the water. hard, just along the edge, then throw it aside. 3 good times should do it, then run like your life depends on it. It does.
He nodded, bent down, and started connecting the 2 parts of his shovel. I began to drag my feet toward the ant hive in even, smooth motions. In my previous experiments, I'd found that stepping alerted them the quickest. The vibrations underground set them off. Things sliding along the surface of the sand alerted them much more slowly. I stopped a foot or so away from the ant, swallowed hard, and brought the bowl down as quickly as I could, trapping the ant beneath. I dragged the bowl a few feet further from the nest, pushed it down into the sand, and let go. After a few tense moments of watching the nest open, I pulled the top from the bottle and began pouring the water in a narrow line a few inches from the nest's opening, on the side opposite Ferris and I. I went back and forth for a moment until the bottle was finally emptied. I threw it back toward Ferris, and he caught it, tossing my second bowl toward me, which I also caught. I slid my feet back a few steps and waited for the second ant to cycle out. What was taking so long? I glanced back to Ferris, who shrugged his shoulders. I held up my hand, signaling for him to wait or be calm, but maybe I was projecting my own nervousness. They usually didn't take this long to come out. Did something go wrong with the water? Too much sugar? Not enough? On top of everything else, I'd begun sweating profusely, which just added to my anxiety. Finally, an ant popped out and was immediately distracted by the sugary water pooled on top of the sand. Again, I did the same thing, capturing it under my bowl and pulling it over next to the other. I stood next to them for a moment, watching the opening. I held up my hand, ready to signal Ferris, counting in my head. 19, 18, 17, 16. I slid my feet back, slowly making my way back toward Ferris. 15, 14, 13, 12. I held up my hand, looking at him over my shoulder. He gripped the shovel tightly and nodded. 11, 10, 9, 8. I bent down, sliding my bottle back into my pack. 7, 6, 5, 4. I picked up my pack with my free hand, sliding it off one shoulder. 3, 2, 1. I brought my hand down in a sharp motion, and Ferris sprinted toward the nest, burying the shovel into the ground, then turning out the sand beside him. 1 down. He plunged the shovel down a second time. The angle was too sharp. No! Ants swarmed out of the hive in all different directions.
Drop it and run!
I screamed. He tossed the sand aside and plunged the shovel down a third time.
I said, drop it, idiot! Forget it!
The third shovel went in smoothly, and he turned up the hive, roughly the size of a human head. Ants were already swarming onto the shovel from the nest and would be all over him soon after.
Drop it and run!
I shouted to the very limits of my voice, even though he was just a few feet away from me. This time, at least, he listened. He threw the shovel aside and bolted in my direction. I grabbed his pack from the ground and tossed it toward him before turning myself. We wouldn't have to sprint far, just enough to get out of their range. We'd still be able to see the hive, but terror ants lost interest quickly beyond a certain distance. After a few seconds of running, I stopped and looked over my shoulder. They'd stopped following us and instead swarmed around the nest with all the fury that comes with having your home unearthed when you were one of the most dangerous insects in the desert. They wanted something to pay.
They'll swarm around for the morning, but they'll abandon the hive by noon,
I said in my calmest voice, before turning and punching him with everything I had in his shoulder.
Ouch! What was that for?
He shouted, jumping back.
Stupid! Stupid!
I screamed, punching him again, and drew back to hit him again before freezing in place.
Oh no, don't move, don't even breathe.
He knew what that meant, and he became a statue. There was an ant on his shoulder, and another on his leg. I drew back my open hand and smashed the one on his shoulder. He shrieked a full second later. At first I thought I'd hit him too hard, but then I realized,
Stay calm, don't move,
I said, circling him to get a better angle on the ant on his leg. It bit through the leather.
Get it! Get it!
He was trembling now, and his voice gave away the tears. fear or pain, both of which were understandable. I dropped to my knees and quickly swatted it before it could bite again.
Let me check the rest of you, you stupid, stupid idiot.
It burns. Oh man, I'm gonna die.
His trembling intensified. I didn't want to think about it, but there had been villagers who died from a single bite, but none of them as big as my brother.
You're not going to die.
I said, still looking him over.
Okay, I think that's it. Next time when I say to drop the shovel, drop it.
I yelled, suppressing the urge to punch him again. He began speaking, but didn't continue, starting to sway. His head lowered.
Ferris?
His head snapped back up again.
I don't think I can walk with my leg. I can't feel it. Go get help.
I eyed the rising sun. As much as I loved the sun, I hated the sight of it now. I dropped my pack and ripped off my hat and gloves.
There's no time. Between the bite and the heat, you'll be dead before I make it back. Drop your pack. We have to beat the sunlight. Climb on my back.
No, Tay, it's too far. That'll kill you too. Just go.
Now.
I shouted, punching him again in the shoulder, though I held back a little this time. He winced, though I knew it wasn't from me. I ripped off his hat and turned my back to him, kneeling.
Ferris, hurry.
We stood there like that a moment, in a stalemate of stubbornness. But he finally gave in, collapsing onto my back. Could I actually carry him all the way back? I could barely stand up with him. He was so much bigger than me. No, I would have to. I'd have to find a way. I stared into the distance toward our village, not even in sight, my body already feeling like it was roasting beneath the breaking dawn. I wrapped my arms behind his knees and cried out as I shrugged to my feet. I gritted my teeth, closed off my mind from the heat and the pain, and took my first steps. Chapter 3. I had the same dream again, lying on the hot desert sands, not a sound other than the light breeze passing over me. I stretched my limbs, grabbing handfuls of sand and letting it fall between my fingers. I was startled this time when I looked up and saw Ferris there. He was standing there, smiling, the wind blowing through his hair. I smiled back and tried to speak to him, but no sound escaped my mouth.
You did this.
He said, still smiling. I tried to answer, but again, I couldn't speak.
You did this.
He repeated. I panicked, grabbing my throat. I tried to stand but couldn't sit up. Ants swarmed up around me, but they passed over me, climbing up Ferris's legs, then his torso.
You did this.
He said again. No, I wanted to scream. I'm sorry, is what I should have tried to say. The ants bit at him ferociously, tearing his skin, but still, he smiled at me.
You did this.
I opened my mouth to scream, but there was nothing. Finally, my voice came to me, as well as my strength. I bound up from the desert floor with a shriek, but something grabbed me, something I couldn't see.
Tay.
The voice was distant, muffled. I fought again to get free, screaming for Ferris to run.
Tay.
The voice was closer this time. Father?
Tay. Calm down. I'm here. You're all right.
Came his voice, like sunbeams piercing a deep, dark abyss. The desert faded around me.
Father? I'm sorry. Where's Ferris?
I shouted.
Try to calm yourself. You're delirious from the heat. You must take water. Sit, please.
My father pleaded as he offered me an open canteen. I sat back onto my bed and took the water from him, drinking it with a thirst I hadn't felt in as long as I could remember. I finished the entire thing in less than half the time it should have taken.
Ferris, is he okay?
I said more calmly this time.
He is. He's not as tough as you, but he's tougher than you realize. He woke up about an hour ago, much in the way you did, raving about his sister.
He laughed at this, for some reason.
Gather yourself and go see him. I'm sure he already heard your screaming and knows you're awake.
I nodded. I'm sure he did. I was so unbelievably embarrassed for screaming in front of Father like that. I lowered my head and smelled my arm, then pulled my hair in and inhaled deeply, looking up at him with my eyebrows narrowed.
Your mother.
He said, pulling the unspoken question from my mind. I wasn't sure whether I should be thankful or angry. My hair was expertly combed and shampooed with the same fragrances Mother always used. My hands were soft with scented lotions, and I had a sinking feeling she'd put makeup on me. But when I leaned to the side so that I could see the mirror on my door, I was relieved to see that she at least hadn't gone that far. I touched my face and sighed. Father gave me a firm slap on the shoulder.
For once, I agreed with your mother. We could smell you coming before we saw you,
He said with a broad smile.
Come, you seem to be feeling well enough.
He gave me his hand and helped me stand. I still felt sick from the heat, and my memory was still a haze. I looked down and sighed again.
Such a beautiful dress Mother has put me in.
I said sarcastically.
It is.
He agreed, but without a hint of sarcasm, before motioning for me to follow him. I did. Around the corner from my room was Ferris's. As Father pushed open the door, I saw Mother and our village doctor applying a salve to his wound.
Knock next time,
The giant man growled. If you had any number of guesses as to what Doc Norman's profession was, solely based on appearance, you certainly wouldn't guess that he was a doctor. His beard was larger and thicker than Father's, but just as white. Father wasn't a small man, but Doc Norman stood a full head taller, with broader shoulders and a barrel chest.
Sorry, Doc.
I said in my most ladylike voice I could muster. I didn't want my father flying off the handle and getting into an argument with Doc while tending to Ferris.
Thank you for tending to Ferris.
Father raised a brow, but Mother looked as though she would explode with pride. This surprised me. I couldn't remember Mother ever looking at me that way, and it hurt. It also made me regret that I'd spoken that way just to save Father's blood pressure. Then again, maybe that's what she was impressed with. She'd been telling me more lately that I needed to use my feminine gifts to persuade and stop behaving like I was her second son. Remembering that, the warm feeling that was there for only a moment quickly faded.
sorry indeed.
Doc grumbled.
You should be caned for dragging your brother out there so—
I dragged him back too, didn't I?
I interrupted in my regular tone.
Yes, so you nearly got Ferris killed, but you also saved his life. I hope you don't show that same kindness to my wife's spikehead lizard when she brings him to see you tomorrow.
Your wife's spikehead lizard will probably follow my instructions better.
He looked down at Ferris and grunted. Or it could have been a laugh. Just about everything sounded like a grunt with Doc.
That I can believe.
He looked to my mother, holding up the canister he'd scooped the salve from.
Twice a day for pain. I can do nothing for the healing, but that will happen on its own. He's young and strong.
She bowed her head.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, thank you.
Father added. We stood silently for a moment before Father jabbed me with his elbow and cleared his throat. I bowed my head.
Thank you, and please send my regards to your wife.
I said, in my sweeter voice again. I could practically feel Mother beaming from where she sat on my brother's bed. Suddenly, Ferris's arm shot up from the bed, pointing at me.
What has that feminine creature done to my sister?
I gritted my teeth.
Shut up!
I shouted.
I should have left you out there to feed the ants.
I turned quickly, outpacing my father's arm that had reached out to grab for me, and slammed the door behind me. I ran to my room and slammed that door too, causing the mirror to fall off and shatter onto the floor before I could catch it. I put my hands over my mouth, sat on my bed, and started sobbing quietly. Why did I react that way? I hated when I lost my temper that way. He was clearly joking, and I knew he had to be in so much pain, even with Doc's salve. He was trying to make me laugh. It was Mother I was angry with, not him. But I wasn't sure she deserved it either. A knock came.
Tay,
Father's voice.
Just a minute.
come to the table when you're ready. I need to speak with you.
I didn't answer, just wiped my face with my sleeves and sniffed before climbing onto the floor and picking up the pieces of glass. I had intended to come in here and change, But now that I'd calmed down, I thought better of it. I had doubled my appointments yesterday so I could retrieve the hive today without a limit on time. Time, time, time! It was already past noon, surely. It would spoil if it stayed out any longer. I dropped the glass onto the table beside my bed and rushed from the room toward the front door.
Tay,
Father said firmly. I stopped short of the door.
I'm sorry, I'll be back. I have to get the hive before it spoils.
I reached out and grabbed the handle.
stop!
He shouted.
I said I'm sorry. I'll be back soon.
It's late in the day. It would have been too late.
He said.
Oh no. Wait, would have been?
He smiled and reached under the table, pulling out a large sphere wrapped in cloth. I clapped my hands together and ran over to him, hugging his neck tightly. He chuckled with surprise.
Aren't you glad I was so nosy when you explained all of this to your brother?
You're the best.
I said genuinely.
Me? Who said anything about me?
He said, raising his brow.
You don't mean
I said, my eyes widening.
Don't you think you should?
apologize? Probably.
He narrowed his eyes at me. I sighed.
Absolutely. Definitely. Big time.
I stood up straight when Doc walked up to us, and he stood in front of me, grabbing my head roughly, taking the other hand to pull up one of my eyelids. He placed the back of his hand on my cheek, then grabbed my hand and looked at my fingernails.
Light sweating. Normal skin. Fingernails are showing signs of dehydration.
I said. Doc grunted.
You may behave like an animal sometimes, Taylor, but you're a human, or so your parents keep insisting. I'm the human doctor.
He patted me on the head.
Get some rest and drink as much water as you can keep down. Don't exert yourself anymore today.
He stepped out the door without another word. I looked to Father.
Unwrap it.
I said.
The hive?
Yes. Can you think of a grander apology?
Guess not. But the chieftain pays by weight, doesn't he?
I nodded.
It's all right. It'll just be a thin slice. Just enough for a taste.
He unfolded the cloth with a noticeable reluctance. I pulled a knife from a nearby drawer and slowly, very carefully, took a thin slice off the top. It was bright yellow and spongy, making a crackling noise as the knife slid back and forth. As I sliced, Father grabbed 2 plates.
4.
I said, correcting him.
You better believe we're getting a taste too.
He went back and fetched 2 more plates, setting them close to the hive on the table.
PanTech soldiers call this cake the miracle of the desert.
I said to him as I finished the slice, balancing it carefully on the knife. He shrugged his shoulders.
I hope they eat an ant.
The ants leave it?
I said before pausing.
But we can hope.
Placing the slice on one plate, I split it into 4 and divided it amongst the plates, picking up 2 of them.
Grab the other 2.
I said, before heading toward my brother's room and flinging open the door.
Tay, I just wanted to say,
Ferris started.
Sorry.
I said, both cutting him off and, I realized, finishing his sentence.
I should be able to take a joke. Here, I thought we should have a taste before I take it to the chieftain.
I handed a plate to him and Mother, then turned and took one from Father. Ferris was the first to take a bite.
whoa, totally worth getting bit by a terror ant. How can those evil things make something that tastes like this?
Mother brought her piece to her lips, sliding it gently into her mouth.
Well, I've found they like sweet things. I think they somehow refine it inside their body and condense the sugars over and over before regurgitating it into their nest material. Creates a flavor even PanTech hasn't been able to reproduce, apparently.
For a moment, I thought Mother would gag. She paused, but placing manners above all else, quickly resumed chewing before smiling.
Amazing. It's no wonder our guests love this so much.
Father winced, and I was afraid he was about to lose his temper, but he looked at me, grabbed the piece from his plate, and tossed it into his mouth.
It's good. Too good for them.
He said. Mother shook her finger at him.
Please don't say things like that. I've told you. What if someone hears you?
Let them hear me.
He shouted.
What more can they take from me? They already took my life's work.
Your family, your children's futures. We should be grateful to them. Living in adversity makes us better. It makes us strong.
He threw up his arms in frustration.
This again?
I sighed, taking the piece from my plate, biting off half of it, and chewing it slowly. I'd put all that work into scavenging for these in the past before I developed the extraction method, but not once had I tasted one. It was heavenly. It was like a cake, but 1,000 times sweeter. The flavor seemed to melt into my tongue and didn't diminish as I held it there. I wondered for a moment how long a human could go without swallowing, but several shouts from outside our home startled me, and I swallowed hard.
They're here,
One said.
Go and get changed. You'll want to look your best.
Another shouted. Mother smiled.
Best you run as quickly as you can to get the rest of this to the chieftain so that he can present it to our guests.
I had been dreading this day for weeks. Chapter 4. I quickly rewrapped the hive on the table and made for the door, barely slowing to turn the handle and spill out into the open world. Or at least, what we were allowed to experience of the open world. PanTech decided just how open it was allowed to be. A wall encircled the entire area, several miles out from the village. I'd walked along its edges many times. It wasn't a wall that could be destroyed, or scaled, or even seen. Markers jutted from the sand to show where the invisible wall ran. Anything that wasn't human could pass through it, but if a human tried, they were pushed back and paralyzed temporarily. Father said that when he was younger, a boy had actually managed to run through it, so they modified it. Now, the effect started much sooner and became so strong that you would be completely incapacitated or dead long before you could sprint through it.
We knew that,
He had said.
because a few still tried.
People like my mother didn't seem to understand that. I didn't care if adversity made me a better person. Maybe it did, but shouldn't I decide? Was I really expected to appreciate soldiers, our so-called guests, to come by and make sure we didn't have too much food, or that people like Father hadn't found a way to make our lives easier, or people like me hadn't? I shook my head, discarding the thought. I wasn't aware of any way they had of reading minds, but they had ways of knowing things that we often couldn't figure out. I focused my mind on what was in front of me. Our home was almost on the other side of the village from the chieftain, so I would have to ignore the urge to vomit I had building in my stomach. I should have taken water with me, but in my haste, I'd forgotten. As I jogged through the village, most people outside moved in the opposite direction toward the village. I dodged and weaved through dead eyes and barely beating hearts. They couldn't wait to see their masters and get their pat on the head. I was nearly knocked down by an elderly woman who rounded a corner at the same time as me as I finally made it in sight of the chieftain's home. She fell onto her back, dropping the basket of clothes she was carrying.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Here, let me help you.
I wrapped one arm under hers and helped her to her feet. I expected to get an earful, but she only chuckled.
I guess my granddaughter was right about something exciting happening in the village.
Aren't you going to go and see them?
I asked.
Why, are they going to help me with my laundry?
Never know. They might. They only seem to care about making your life harder if you're under 18, or if you're making the life of someone under 18 easier.
Well then,
She said, chuckling again.
it looks like they'll be glad I stepped out in front of you and almost made you fall. Don't worry about me, dear. Worry about yourself. You speak far too freely for a girl your age. You'll be safer keeping thoughts like that to yourself.
She was right, of course.
I really have to be going. I'm sorry for running into you.
She waved her hand dismissively and gave me a push from behind. I bowed slightly, then ran the rest of the way to the chieftain's house, where he was waiting outside. The chieftain was one of the only overweight men in the village, and I was convinced that PanTech had selected him specifically because they knew he would do a lousy job. In fact, that was almost a given, considering they punished adults for improving the youth's lives in any way. It was rare for him to be willing to pay for something like this, but he knew how much the soldiers loved their miracle of the desert, and he leaped at the chance to kiss their feet. He frowned at me when he noticed me arrive.
I thought you were coming earlier. Well, that will surely reduce your price,
He said, without giving me time to answer, turning to walk around behind his very nice house where he kept his scale, waving for me to follow. The way he spoke annoyed me far more than anything about the way he looked like he was trying to change his accent deliberately so he wouldn't sound like the rest of us. The premise of which was so idiotic it was hard to be believed. The village is isolated. Where else exactly could he have come from? Aside from that, he was the son of the last village chieftain, so there really was no doubt. If you got him flustered enough, he'd revert to his usual way of speaking. But otherwise, he'll add this strange sound to the end of a lot of his words. I also didn't like how he looked at the other girls in the village, or me. At all. I found myself wishing I'd taken the time to change into my more practical clothes after all. I handed him the hive carefully, and he placed it on the scale.
So, we're down from 300 marks per pound to 250.
He said, shaking his head, as though he was disappointed in having to rip me off.
Uh-huh,
I said, still hoping to salvage the situation in some diplomatic way. What I'd rather do is pull out my knife and stick it in his neck, but as I have been told repeatedly lately, I was a lady now, and that would be very unladylike behavior.
What would you say this paper weighs, several ounces, I'd imagine,
Not even an ounce.
I said, crossing my arms.
Right. 5 ounces from the look of it,
He peeled back the paper.
What's this? Did you take a slicer from it?
I cocked my head.
What difference would that make? But no,
I lied.
I did no such thing. It was like that when I pulled it from the sands.
I see, remind me. How did you tell me you extracted it?
I didn't.
We were quiet for the next few moments. I hoped he was just as worried about me as I was about him. Even at 250 marks per pound, that would still keep the clinic and my home going for weeks if I really stretched it.
I don't believe you. 200 marks per pound. It is both late and damaged,
He wrinkled his nose and sniffed, then coughed without covering his mouth.
With all due respect, sir, you won't be ready in time if we take much longer. I'd heard that our guests were making their way straight here first.
I lied again. I noticed that he'd taken his hand that had been down at his side and placed it on the table, curling his fingers under the bowl of the scale, lifting it ever so slightly to remove several ounces from the weight.
Right, let's see then. It looks like,
I rolled my eyes.
Sir, it looks like you accidentally moved up against the scale. You'd better take a step back while it settles on a number, otherwise it may add extra weight. I wouldn't want you to overpay.
He curled his lip.
right,
He backed a step away. We watched the number for a moment, and when the hand of the scale stopped moving, he turned and started dropping the small copper marks into a small sack, with his back facing me. Of course. After a minute of clinging and clanging into the sack, he tied a string around it tightly, no doubt to discourage me from counting. The chieftain had plenty of money to spare. He no longer had to worry about his own adversity, and as long as someone was as self-centered as he was, PanTech couldn't care less. He certainly wasn't doing anything to make anyone's life more comfortable around here. You couldn't make him want to do that if you held a knife to his throat. I took the sack from him.
Thanks. By the way, I spent weeks finding this one. They're getting to be rare. Probably going to need at least 400 per pound next time.
400
He shouted before stopping himself and lowering his voice again.
400 per pound. Are you out of your mind?
No, and it was a lot of work carrying all of the gear out there and back, preparing it for transport and getting it to you in time to present it to our guests. I also had to close my clinic today. I'm thinking about adding a delivery fee.
I scratched my chin.
But you're a much more experienced businessman than I am. What do you think?
He took a deep breath that sounded more like a wheeze.
Girl, I have ways of making sure your life here gets a lot harder, so you may not want to play that game with me.
He wasn't lying. He could, and PanTech would pat him on the back for it. More adversity will make her better. You've done well, they'd say. I held up the sack.
I know you mean what you say, so do I. Good day to you, sir.
I bowed my head, turned, and left a little quicker than is customary. But I didn't want to give him time to think of whatever kind of sick thing he probably wanted to say. I hoped he wouldn't even ask me to get another hive for him. I'd improve the clinic going some other way. If Mother were here, she'd have been disappointed in me for disrespecting the chieftain that way and being so impulsive. Why did I even care? I made it almost back to our house when I bumped into someone again, my mind still in the clouds, worried the chieftain might retaliate.
Hello.
The voice said simply. I'd stumbled backward and taken a moment to gather myself and look up. Standing before me was one of the PanTech soldiers. A handsome one, too, maybe a few years older than me. Shoulder-length blonde hair with bright blue eyes and pale skin, even more so than Mother's. I choked on my words. Is he angry? You don't usually say hello that way to people you're mad at. Is it a test? Oh no, I should apologize quickly,
Sorry,
I said finally.
I've been saying that a lot today.
Hard day. Glad to see you're keeping it together.
Yeah, really hard day.
I said, scratching the back of my head and looking away. I knew we weren't supposed to act like we were afraid of them, because some of them found it insulting, but that was a tall order. They wore armor that gleamed in the sun, with large rifles slung over their shoulder, a shorter sidearm on their hips. The armor made them look much larger than they were. One of the soldiers had told Mother about it one day when she was ogling his suit. It's filled with water, which some kind of portable power keeps cool. It's also harder than steel and 100 times lighter. They wore helmets sometimes that I wasn't sure how they saw through. Some kind of equally advanced technology, I'm sure.
I'll be going now. I'm sorry.
I turned quickly to walk away, to take another route home. He grabbed me by the arm as I turned, and my stomach felt like it would twist into a dozen knots all at once. I'd never been grabbed by one of them before. Usually, I managed to avoid them altogether.
You'll need to come with me.
He said. Chapter 5. He led me by the arm, more like dragged me, for several minutes without a word.
Hey,
I said.
do you know you're hurting my arm?
He let go abruptly and turned to me.
Oh, right. The suit. Sorry, it enhances my strength. This is the first time I've worn one. Oh, I'm not supposed to apologize to citizens.
He shook his head, as if reprimanding himself inside his mind.
I'm Linus, by the way.
He made a fist and sighed.
Not supposed to do that either. Mind if we just forget this whole exchange?
I couldn't help but laugh.
Taylor.
Nah, soldier, actually. Oh, you meant... Wow, I'm really bad at this.
He looked away, scratching the back of his head, his cheeks flush. Was he actually embarrassed? I laughed again, resenting myself a bit for doing so. It must have been his first day. I'm sure after a few more, he'll be just as cruel and rude as most of the others once he'd received better training.
Taylor, nice meeting you. I was told to find any stragglers and lead them to the front of the village. Commander wants to give everyone a speech. No idea why, but it seemed important.
I nodded, hoping he'd trip over himself again and offer more bits of information, but he'd composed himself.
Follow me, please,
He said. Pausing for a moment, he corrected himself.
Follow me.
I obeyed. As much as this soldier seemed different from the others, I had to be on my guard. I found him almost hard not to like, but maybe that was a trick. Maybe acting nice to me and then taking me behind an unoccupied house and punching my face was some sick strategy to enhance my adversity. No, Father hated them for a good reason. I was right to, as well. I needed to keep on doing it. We finally made it back to the front of the village, where he left me in the gathered crowd and took his place behind the commander.
Just one?
She asked, looking at Linus as he approached.
One, ma'am.
He answered, his tone curt while still being professional. Clearly he hadn't forgotten the proper way to speak to his commander. She placed her hands behind her, one hand gripping her wrist, resting on the small of her back. Her back was straight, and her head was slightly leaning back. She had red hair, freckled cheeks, and bright green eyes, that were similar to father's. Her suit fit her body shape, except larger. I always found it looked funny on women, all slender and shapely, with a tinier head sticking out of the top. Come to think of it, it looked funny on the men, too, to a lesser extent. Another soldier returned, empty-handed, nodding to his commander before taking his place behind her. This happened a few more times over the next few minutes, with most of the soldiers returning empty-handed, except for one leading 2 people behind him, one of which was the elderly lady I'd ran into earlier. It irked me that she was being handled so roughly. He had paler skin than Linus, and freckles covered his face. The lady slowed for a moment, and he shoved her, making her stumble forward, nearly falling.
Move it!
He shouted. I took a step toward him, but Linus grabbed my arm, pulling me back. I looked up at him, intent on arguing. He offered only a subtle shake of his head as a warning, but the disgust on his face gave away his personal feelings on the matter. Before I could open my mouth, the commander spoke.
Everyone, listen carefully to the words I have for you. A gift far kinder than you can imagine, given the circumstances. Indeed, I am putting my own safety at risk by giving you these words.
The beautiful flame-haired tyrant droned on, and I mustered up every ounce of will I had to keep from slamming my palm into my forehead if her kindness didn't kill me first.
We have always been kind to all of you, and the adversity we deliver to your young ones is from a place of love and hope for a better future, not just for your people, but for all people.
She paced back and forth in front of the crowd, gesturing with her hands as she spoke. It was clear that she was going for the gentle motherly approach, but something in this woman's face gave away her hardness. There was a darkness in her features that I couldn't put into clear thoughts, almost as though she was eager to get to the next part, the bad part, the threat, and probably a violent one.
So you can imagine my disappointment,
she continued, her tone hardening,
to learn that there are some among you that fail to appreciate our kindness and our dedication to building the character of our next generation. You must be wondering now why I'm standing before you talking about this when it would be so easy for us to remove this cancer with surgical precision.
She smiled, a poor attempt to once again appear kind.
This is the gift I alluded to. We have decided to allow you to deal with this problem yourselves rather than intervene. We've decided to allow your village to retain as much independence as possible, so long as you continue to earn it. Of course, I'm not permitted to speak of the other adversity zones, but let me assure you that some of them do not enjoy nearly the autonomy that your village does. You see, like the cancer I mentioned, it will spread if not cut out early. So the more it spreads, the grander the action required from us to halt it. Against the judgment of our experts, we will give you one opportunity to deal with the offenders. In the meantime, we will station outside the village and monitor the situation. Your chieftain will communicate with us regularly. We've communicated with him in advance, so he is prepared.
How had they managed to do this, I wondered? Spies? Informants? A long-range communication device? Yes, probably that one. After all, I'd seen the soldiers communicate this way before, touching their ears and speaking to no one there to hear them. Actually, it was probably all 3. Our blubbering idiot of a chieftain in action, doing what he probably does best. Why should I be surprised? Linus shot a glance at me, but was quick to look away when our eyes met. Was there something he wanted to tell me? Didn't matter. Not like he'd have the chance to say it, even if he wanted to. More likely, he was toying with me in some cruel way. Send the handsome warrior to fetch the 17-year-old, nearly 18-year-old girl with rebellious thoughts. Paranoid? Maybe, but I wouldn't put it past them.
And now I'll step aside for your chieftain,
she said finally. Gods, no. I'd almost rather they unsling their rifles and start shooting. He revealed himself from inside the crowd and stepped forward.
I have only a few things to say,
Thank goodness. He cleared his throat with the gurgling, slimy sound that was unique to him.
I only want to assure our guests that this matter will be resolved with diligence. To show the appreciation that the overwhelming majority of us have for their kindness over the years. We will try peace first, but failing that, we will step aside and our guests will step in and deal with the traitors. That's all.
He nodded to the commander, who motioned for the rest of her soldiers to follow her. I caught Linus glancing at me again, his expression grim. What was on his mind? I felt my cheeks grow warmer. Maybe I was on his mind. Come on, Taylor, pull yourself together. Now's not the time to have fantasies about handsome warriors coming to sweep you off your feet. Stupid. Ugh. He was trying to tell me something, though. I was almost sure of it. What was it? They departed, and the rest of us were left to stand around, looking at one another in confusion. Some gullible villagers were no doubt sniffing about for the guilty party, hoping to sell out their own people to win favor from PanTech that would never come. Ever. I didn't want to be the first to leave, but as soon as the crowd started to move, I eagerly moved with it, making my way to my house, hoping no one else would speak to me along the way. Thankfully, no one did. I stepped through the front door. Father and Mother were already sitting at the table talking. They stopped when they saw me.
Catch the big speech?
I said, trying to sound apathetic.
We didn't have a choice.
My father grumbled.
They came and knocked on the door and didn't exactly ask.
At least they knocked.
My mother chimed in.
They don't have to, you know. They could have smashed the door down and dragged us out.
Let them try it. I'd love to.
The floor started rumbling and furniture shook. At first, just the empty chairs, but soon everything was shaking. A moment later, it stopped, and then a scream. Outside somewhere. Had they found the rebels?
Taylor, stay in.
I bolted out of the door before Mother could finish her sentence. I looked around, but couldn't spot anything out of the ordinary, and then the scream came again. Someone help me! A woman's voice shrieked again, and a commotion followed. I ran toward it, my head spinning, both from nausea and excitement. The closer I got, the tighter the crowd was, but I forced my way through. I knew this woman. I came to see her animals every week to take care of them. She lived on the edge of the village and owned several pigs. She was crouched over a pig on the ground, breathing heavily and bleeding from some kind of large gash. There had been complaints about her pigs before due to the smell and noise. Had someone taken advantage of the commotion today to kill this one? Taylor, thank goodness! Help! I ran over as fast as I could, dropping to my knees.
Towel! Rags! Something! We have to stop the bleeding!
A man stepped over and yanked off his shirt, tossing it to me. I looked at the wound briefly before covering it. What in the world? It was enormous and looked deep. He wasn't going to survive this.
I'll do what I can,
I lied, trying to comfort her.
What did this to him?
She sobbed into her apron. I don't know. I heard him squealing, and I ran out. It was right after the ground shook.
Did anyone see what happened?
I scanned the crowd, looking at everyone. At first, no one would answer. Finally, a small boy, who looked no older than 5, stepped forward.
I did,
he said nervously. I continued holding the shirt over the pig's wound, but he'd gone still. Nothing could survive a wound that large. I nodded to the boy before returning my attention to the woman.
I'm sorry. He's gone.
She took a deep breath and sighed, rubbing her face with her sleeve. You did what you could, dear. She looked to the boy expectantly, as did I.
What was it? What did you see?
I asked. He shook his head.
You won't believe me,
he said. I put my hand on his shoulder.
It's all right. Please tell us.
He took a deep breath and looked as though he was going to cry.
It was a monster.
Chapter 6. I kept my hand on his shoulder and held my expression like stone. Several others crowded around, couldn't help themselves, but cackle and laughter. Others probably wanted to, but chose not to out of consideration for the poor woman who'd lost a valuable member of her livestock. Me? I felt sick, sicker than I already was. What a day. My sickness came from deeper down. It was a dread that told me I'd already expected him to say something like that. I knew and didn't want to believe it. It would take a spear larger than any man could carry to make that wound.
A monster?
I asked, my tone as even as I could make it.
What kind of monster?
A giant snake.
He choked on his words as if fighting the tears that had become too much for the small child to bear.
A giant snake,
I said. I'd meant it as a question, but it had come out as a statement.
From the ground, it came from a hole, didn't it?
You saw it too?
He asked. His tears temporarily halted by the hope that at least one other person in the village had seen what he'd seen.
No. Will you please take me to the hole? Can you?
I asked, speaking quietly now. He nodded. I turned to the lady.
Please have your pig transported to my clinic. If you do, I'll pay you a fair market price for him. I want to study that wound more. The sooner the better, please.
You really think? She trailed off.
The sooner the better,
I repeated, before turning my attention back to the boy.
Lead on.
We didn't have to go far. Just around the corner of the woman's home was an overturned cart, filled with various tools, all spilled onto the ground. Behind it, there was an enormous hole, sand piled high around it. The hole had to be as wide as my arms outstretched, fingertips to fingertips. If this was what I thought it would be a thing of nightmares, and this would be just the beginning. You'd venture into your nightmares to escape it if you had the choice.
Brown, like the sand, speckled gray. Fangs stick out of its mouth, wide in the front but narrow in the back. A head much thicker than the body.
You did see it.
He hugged my leg. Oh, how I dreaded that reaction. Gods, a giant desert burrower. They made this thing and transported it here. They let it go outside the village, and it was already applying its skill. A skill I'd seen used so many times on small animals outside the gates, and sometimes inside. They were fast, had senses like almost nothing else. Maybe the mythical Shadowfalcon topped it, but that was assuming they were real. Father insisted they were, but I assigned mistaken identification to every sighting until I saw one myself. I'd personally seen the burrower in action. It was one of those experiences that gave you the specific thought that you should let go of a deep breath, relieved that they are one of the smallest snakes and carry no venom due to the unique shape of their fangs. Miniature shovels on both sides, half circle around the front, hollow and open in the back so they can spin under the sand and propel themselves rapidly beneath terrain. The vibration would give it away at least, just before it surfaced, but ironically made it even more terrifying.
No, but I think I know what it is. Thank you.
I reached into the pouch I'd been carrying in the side pocket of my dress, pulling out the sack of marks the chieftain handed to me earlier. I took one out and gave it to him.
For me?
He said, his eyebrows furrowed. I didn't blame him. Children learned early to be skeptical of strangers' kindness, seeing that it was so highly frowned upon. If someone from PanTech saw me do this, I'd likely be reprimanded. At this moment, I couldn't care less what PanTech thought. I was more concerned with what they'd done.
For you,
I said, and nodded in the affirmative.
Let's keep the payment our little secret. Say you found it in the sand.
He nodded vigorously, his eyes flashing with the useless knickknacks he could use this mark to purchase, and, for just a moment, seeming to forget the horrific creature he'd seen.
Run along, and maybe play inside for the next few days.
He ran but turned briefly to wave at me as he did. It was useless to ask him to keep that to himself. He practically broadcasted his appreciation to the whole world, with just the look on the face and the newfound bounce in his step. It very well could have been the first time anything like that had happened to him. Both things that had happened to him. I hated PanTech so much that, if there were some way for them to read minds, I'd be setting off every alarm at the moment. I couldn't tell the village to prepare. I couldn't offer my theory on where this creature came from. PanTech would deny it, as they always did with their tricks. They'd pretend to help. I'd have requested the one rifle the village was allowed to use, that every villager is allowed to fire 10 times on his or her 16th birthday, enough to become familiar with the function of the weapon. The trigger, the sights, the recoil, the noise, but not enough to become proficient. I had a knack for it, though. Enough that after the 5th and 6th round high bullseye, that I intentionally missed the last 4 shots almost completely. Besides, I needed the authorization of a PanTech soldier to take it out on loan. Wait, Linus! What if he did have an eye for me? I could use that. I certainly couldn't threaten him or beat up another soldier and take their rifle. I wouldn't know how to use it anyway. It looked almost completely different from the old wood, metal, and smoke relic that exploded projectiles from brass-cased rounds and held 10 magazine shots. I felt gross at the thought. What if Linus really was a nice man, and I took advantage of his feelings? What if I got him punished or even killed? No. This was PanTech. I couldn't allow for such soft emotions. The sick feeling reminded me of the pig and put me back in the moment. I needed to have a look at it. Hopefully, they had it over at the clinic already. This snake shouldn't have venom, but I didn't put anything past PanTech. If they'd managed to create a giant one, maybe this one had venom or even shoots the venom from its fangs. Perhaps it could see in the dark. Maybe its scales were as hard as steel. I shook my head. Definitely not the thoughts I needed to be having if I wanted to be in the moment. I jogged back toward the clinic, finding that 4 men had just dropped the pig onto one of my wooden examination tables under an open canopy. My first thought was that I hadn't cleaned it yet before I realized it didn't matter. I thanked them and began my examination. It was too bad I'd given Kara the day off today. I really could have used her help to take notes. It would all have to be in my head today. After another moment of consideration, I decided that was indeed for the best. A written record of my findings probably wouldn't be great for my health or the health of those around me. I unlocked a box behind me and pulled out a long wooden rod. I inserted it into the wound, pushing it gently as far as I could, marking the depth with my fingers and making a mental note of the length. Large enough to have easily swallowed the pig and dragged him down his tunnel. Easily. So why didn't it? Assuming they are like the normal burrower, they rarely fail to retrieve the prey they've bitten, unless they're young and inexperienced. Oh no, what if it's a baby? It would grow enormous. Even all of the animals outside the village couldn't sustain it. It would hunt us too, and we'd be easier targets. It would wipe us out before it became fully grown. I took a deep breath and composed myself. Inexperienced. That was the critical part. If PanTech brought it here, it was probably grown and cared for in some kind of special environment. A big, expensive lab, where they'd feed it on a cycle, and it would never have to hunt. It's new to hunting. That's why it bit the pig, but didn't pull it back through the tunnel. Maybe the kid spooked it, but as soon as it realizes that we're no more dangerous than the pig, that won't last long. It's possible that if it came from PanTech, it would be somewhat tame to humans, unless they took precautions against that somehow. In either scenario, this meant that we need to kill the snake quickly. The more time it took, the more it would adapt to the environment around it. The more experienced it would be with hunting, and if it kills a human, it'll come back. None of its other prey will be as tightly packed as we are. This was a disaster. I rubbed my forehead with my forearm. Right, I didn't even look for venom on the rod. There was no guarantee I'd see it, especially if it was unique to this animal and something I'd never seen before. I examined the tissue around the wound. There were no signs along the edge of venom that often spilled from the initial wound. Pig's tongue was normal, and eyes appeared normal. I breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed to be a mostly identical version of the normal burrower, but I wondered what difference that really made. The wound was too deep to even tell how deep it was. All I could tell was that it was huge, but not quite huge enough to go through the other side. Even that wasn't a certainty, because it could have failed to get a complete bite. Still, the estimate I could make seemed consistent with the size of the hole it burrowed. We could plug the holes we find with poison and hope that it came back through and accidentally ingests it. Cross our fingers that would do the trick. Not likely. They rarely use the same holes twice unless they come back immediately to chase wounded prey. Once they retreat, The burrowed tunnel collapses quickly beneath the unstable sand. I couldn't tell Mother and Father. If I got caught, they'd be implicated, assuming they don't end up being implicated anyway. At least if they genuinely didn't know what I'd intended, maybe they'd let them off. Ferris couldn't join me, even if he wanted to. He was going to be useless for at least a week or more. If I went and simply asked the chieftain for the rifle, he'd report me for doing it unauthorized. I was fairly certain he knew already. Who could help me? I stood there racking my brain for a long while and finally accepted the reality. No one. No one could help me. Even if I could manipulate Linus into authorizing my use of the rifle for some other reason, I had to hunt and kill this monster on my own. Somehow. Fantastic. Chapter 7. I considered what I might do with the pig's carcass, or if there was anything I really could do with it. I entertained the thought of using it for bait, but remembered that wasn't how burrowers hunted. They felt the vibrations on the sand, ripped out of their tunnel, and stole their prey away. The pig wouldn't do much good for that. There was always eating the pig. After all, I would be paying for it, but I didn't want to risk that PanTech may have found a way to make the venom undetectable through normal means. In the end, the very inconvenient course of action I found to be best was to roll the thing out of the village and dump it far away so the carrion and scavengers that roamed the desert would eat it. Vultures would make short work of it. Once I'd done that, the daylight was spent, and so was I. The snake needed dealing with, but there was nothing I could do about it for now, and I certainly couldn't tell anyone what I was planning. My father was waiting for me when I came through the door. A candle was burning on the table in front of him, and he was reading a book.
"Did you find out what caused that quake earlier?"
He said, not looking up from his book. So much for sneaking to my room without him talking to me. I should have known that would never happen. I considered for a moment what kind of lie I would tell. Should I lie? If I told him the truth, what would happen? Lying to Father felt about as wrong can be, and in the end, I couldn't do it. Not entirely, at least. A half-truth would have to do. A compromise to ease my conscience.
A snake bit a pig, actually.
And that caused a quake.
He looked up at me as I sat at the table across from him, tilting his head. I shrugged my shoulders.
Seems so.
He chuckled and sat the book on the table, face down, leaning back more comfortably in his chair.
Please.
Please what?
I asked.
Please explain that to me. I'm not sure I understand how a snake biting a pig causes a quake. Must have been a pretty big snake or pig.
How's Ferris?
I asked, trying my odds at changing the subject. He sighed, narrowing his eyes at me. His eyes said, "I want you to know that I know what you're doing, but I can see you're exhausted, so I'll play along."
Your brother has been in much pain. You can see it on his face, but he won't admit it, of course. The wound has worsened, as terror ant bites tend to do. It will likely worsen more over the next few days before it begins to heal.
He paused, as if he'd just remembered something else.
Please don't blame yourself for it, Tay.
I shook my head.
Right. You were in the room when I had that nightmare. I'm all right. I'm just glad he made it out with just the one bite, as terrible as one bite is. The ants were devouring him in my dream, but that could have easily been real. In the dream, he blamed me, but I know he wouldn't really. I bet he put you up to talk to me about it, am I right?
He smiled and nodded once.
I knew it. Brave in all the wrong ways.
I wished I could take the words back the moment they left my lips, partly because it was unfair to my brother, and partly because Father was going to ask me.
Why do you say that?
He asked, in perfect sync with my thoughts.
I don't know. I guess I just hate to see him so brainwashed by PanTech. Everyone worships them like they're some kind of savior doing us a favor. They make our life better by making our lives worse? How messed up is that?
You'll get no argument from me about PanTech, but as frustrated as I get with the people of the village for not seeing them for who they are both the oppressor and the savior for anyone looking to move from citizen to employee. Your own test will be coming up soon. Your brother will be testing with you, since he was barely too young for the last one. Or have you chosen to stay in the village?
In truth, while I hadn't really thought about it, I couldn't see myself leaving the village. Sure, Kara could take over as the vet. After all, she has almost as much training as me, but I just didn't feel ambitious, and I certainly did not want to help PanTech.
They say that they have a veterinary laboratory beyond our comprehension. Imagine what you could study there if you were assigned to that section.
I grinned.
So why didn't you go? Didn't you have one of the highest test scores ever recorded from this village?
Haven't I told you before? I get your point. I wanted to stay in the village so I could continue developing some of my inventions here. I wanted to make everyone's life here better. It was foolish of me not to expect what came next. Of course, as soon as I'd given up my chance at a high-level position at their technology institute, they sent soldiers here to destroy my inventions, and they forbade me from recreating them, further developing them, or creating new ones. They told me that it interfered with the adversity experienced by young villagers. They gave me a choice, you know, before they destroyed them. I could continue working on the inventions, but they'd have to offset their benefit with more artificially imposed challenges to the village. More confiscated food, introduction of new illnesses, modifying native animal species to make them more dangerous.
I blurted out before I could stop myself.
Wait, they've done that before?
Of course, Father picked up on the meaning behind what I'd said immediately.
Before? You mean, they've done it again? Tay, is that what you meant by the snake biting a pig caused the quake?
Stupid! Stupid Taylor. I'd gotten him entirely off the topic. He wasn't even thinking about that anymore. Then I go and sabotage myself.
I'm not sure.
I don't know. That sounded sure to me. They've somehow created a snake that's able to cause quakes. Why didn't I hear about such a thing passing through the village?
I rubbed my forehead. I must have been close to collapsing from exhaustion. Today must have been the longest day of my life to this point.
That's because it didn't pass through the village,
I said.
It burrowed beneath, emerged, bit the pig, and escaped through its tunnel.
A burrower, then. But that doesn't explain the quake. How do you know the snake was responsible?
I stared at him blankly for a moment. I was quickly losing the energy to explain anything, and I knew it would come to him.
Oh no. Really?
I nodded.
Yes.
It's that big.
Enormous,
I confirmed.
Because of the rebels they've discovered.
That was my suspicion, too. Keep this between us, please. I don't want the whole town panicking, and they'll target us when they realize it came from me.
You examined the pig, didn't you?
He asked. I nodded.
I've been considering how I might deal with it, but I need more time to come up with something. I think tomorrow I'll visit the PanTech camp outside the village.
He furrowed his brow but said nothing.
I'm going to go see a boy there. I think he's just a little older than me. Actually, I think he likes me. We ran into each other in town before the big speech, and he introduced himself to me. Pretty unusual for a soldier.
Please be careful, Tay. I'm not sure it's a good idea to approach them directly like that.
He's pretty handsome, too,
I added.
Tay.
His tone darkened, and the hint of sadness in his voice gave me a twinge of guilt. I'd only meant to tease him.
I mean it. He wasn't like the other soldiers. Maybe he could tell me something about it. I don't think he'd hurt me if that's what you're worried about.
Never trust PanTech,
he said.
I trust my instincts. They're all I have.
He pondered this for a moment before grunting slightly and nodding.
Good night.
I stood up and stepped around the table, hugging him tightly around the neck.
Good night,
he said, not looking up at me again, already falling deep into his own thoughts. Maybe he was also considering ways to deal with the monster, but I'd get to it first. I didn't tell him that the real reason I was going to see Linus was to convince him to authorize my loan of the rifle and some ammunition. He'd have probably tried to lock me in my room if I'd told him that. Thinking of my room, I wasn't sure I'd ever been so happy to see it when I finally went through its door. The bed, most of all. I frowned when I noticed the pile of broken glass still sitting on the table next to my bed. Yet another reminder of how terrible this day had been. I picked up the largest piece and took a few moments to study my appearance. I wished that I looked more like my father instead of my mother. My reflection was almost like looking into her eyes, only with darker skin. She would always say that made me even more beautiful than her. Mother, of course, was not one for modesty. Then again, perhaps it was Mother I should seek advice from before seeing Linus tomorrow. I'm sure she'd have a lot to say about how I could manipulate boys into doing whatever I wanted. She'd say I was an exotic beauty to him, and I should wear my finest cultural dress. Just the thought made me angry, no matter how right she was. I wanted to study and make new discoveries, like Father had when he was young, not have some man take care of me while I experimented with scented oils and skin moisturizers. I laid out my work clothing, almost to spite her in my mind. Maybe Linus would appreciate a woman who could perform a pig autopsy in the desert heat, or bury her arm elbow deep in a camel. Perhaps he'd appreciate my mind more than my body. Maybe. What was I thinking? All I needed to do was to get him to agree to authorize my use of the rifle. I didn't need him to ask me to marry him. Come on, Taylor, pull it together. I collapsed onto my bed, burying my face into the pillow. I wanted to scream into it, but I was afraid someone would somehow hear me. It didn't matter anyway because I was asleep before I could even finish the thought. Chapter 8. As I dreamed, I found myself again lying on the hot desert sand. My muscles loose and relaxed. The sun was wrapping me in a reassuring glow. A gentle breeze softened the heat enough to shift it from uncomfortable to comforting. My eyes were closed, allowing only a soft light into my vision. I felt a hand gently touch my shoulder, but I wasn't startled. I opened my eyes and realized it was Linus, dressed in our cultural clothing. He was smiling at me, and his blue eyes felt so real, matching the sky so well that it was as though they were transparent as he leaned above me. I smiled back, and he leaned down slowly and met my lips with a soft kiss. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, meeting his kiss more deeply. As I kissed him, he was yanked from my arms with a scream. I saw him being pulled away from me, toward the sky, and as he was pulled further away, I saw the snake that had appeared behind him. It pierced his body with its enormous fangs, pouring blood onto the desert floor. He punched and kicked at the snake's head with futility. As he hung from its jaws, it looked at me, silent and still, hovering above me like a serpent god, demonstrating his power. Finally, Linus stopped struggling, and I knew that he'd died. His body became limp, his limbs dangling, his head wobbling slightly in the breeze as the snake continued to threaten me with his stare. He seemed to carry neither good nor evil intent with it, just a god indulging his hunger with insignificant beings. Linus turned his head slowly toward me, his gentle smile returning, but with tears falling from his eyes onto the sand below.
You did this,
he whispered. No, 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 I sobbed, shouting the words in my mind, but I couldn't speak.
You did this,
he said again, his voice rising to a shout this time. I filled with rage. I wanted to leap to my feet and tear off the snake's head with my bare hands. I wanted to smash him with the sun itself. I wanted to rip his fangs from his jaws and gouge out his eyes with them. My sadness gave way to a fury I rarely allowed myself to feel, a fury that threatened to swallow me whole. And then, I was awake, sitting up in my bed so quickly, it's a wonder I hadn't toppled onto the floor. My skin was wet with cold sweat, and I breathed as though I'd been running for hours. What did that dream mean? Did it mean anything? A feeling of guilt suddenly gripped me. What if Linus was really as kind as he seemed? What if he did like me? What if he's not like most of the other soldiers, and I get him in trouble, or worse? I rubbed the small tears away from my eyes. What a pointless thing to worry about. What was I supposed to do? Let the snake kill everyone in the whole village? What if it was my father who was snatched by it next? Or my brother, or mother, or Kara, or the kind old lady I met yesterday? Even if he was the kindest PanTech soldier ever to live, this is something I had to do. Sacrifices had to be made, even if what I had to sacrifice was a part of myself. I rubbed my eyes again and stood up, getting dressed in my tattered work clothing, not unlike what all the village men and women wore when planning a day of labor. As I reached the door, I thought of Mother and sat back onto my bed, reaching into the drawer of the table beside my bed, pulling out the comb she'd given me. I spent the next several minutes combing my hair before tying it into a loose ponytail. After I left my room, I stepped into the common area, hoping to avoid a conversation. Luckily, aside from Mother, I was the first one up. Her back was to me, cooking. I did my best to sneak quietly to the door. But, as expected, she heard me and turned around before I could reach it.
Good morning. Your hair is beautiful.
I inhaled deeply, putting on a smile that was somewhere between false and genuine.
Thank you. I finally took your advice, I suppose.
She looked down at my clothes, and I waited for her to criticize them, but she didn't. Her smile never weakened.
I'm sure Father told you, but I'm going to head out to the camp today and see a boy named Linus I met yesterday. I may not be back until later, so don't worry about lunch.
I reached for the door, resting my hand on the handle before she stopped me again.
Yes, your father told me. I can only assume that you're going to see him because there's something you need from him.
It's not like...
I started to protest, but wasn't it true?
Sorry, dear. I didn't mean to make that sound like an insult. It wasn't. It was only an observation. I know you haven't had any interest in boys. I also know you don't particularly enjoy hearing my advice, but I would suggest you start considering it. It is a hard world, and there is a reason some women would kill to have your naturally beautiful appearance. You could see it as an insult to them to take it for granted, as though you weren't fortunate.
I sighed, clenching my teeth.
Mother...
She chuckled, which surprised me.
Maybe work on your charm a bit, though. That's a skill that can be learned, regardless of your fortune at birth. Here, I made something for you.
She pulled 2 small sacks from the counter and held them out for me. I eyed them suspiciously, my anxiety building for what sort of contents these bags may have in them.
What are those?
Your lunch,
She said. Then she added a wink.
and his. Salt-cured ham and bread I baked early this morning. Oh, and this.
She reached behind her and fetched a bottle, handing it to me.
Is that cactus wine?
I asked.
For you, only a few sips. For him, as much as he'll drink as long as he behaves.
My cheeks had already started burning. Should I thank my mother? Be furious with her? I wasn't sure anymore, but if it got me that rifle... I grasped the bottle of wine.
Small cups are in the sacks. Be careful, and remember that it's better to make someone your pawn than to become one.
She reached out and moved a wisp of hair aside that had drifted onto my face.
Thank you.
I finally decided to say.
Really, thanks.
She smiled, reaching down and opening the door for me, gently squeezing my arm. Well, that was awkward. But Mother's coming-of-age conversations that had become more frequent in the last year were always awkward. I wasn't sure if that was her or me. Considering how enchanted everyone had always been with Mother, including my father, I could only assume it was me. Guest, I reminded myself, not soldier, not invader, not oppressor, not enemy. I couldn't let my words betray my thoughts. I stopped by the clinic and gave Kara what she would no doubt find to be bad news. She was only a year younger than me, but petite. One might have guessed she was 14 by looking at her, and would have felt even more confident when they heard her small voice that matched her appearance perfectly.
Hey there. It's going to be a busy day with us being closed yesterday. You excited?
She asked, her fist pump making me believe there was no sarcasm in the question.
Well...
I started. She jutted out her bottom lip and crossed her arms.
Oh no, Please don't tell me you're going out again today.
I scratched the back of my head.
I'm sorry, Kara. I really owe you one.
She slapped her cheeks and pulled her hands down her face, stretching her eyes and mouth toward her chest. She groaned.
I'll do my best.
I know you will,
I said, smiling. I did know. Kara was one of the most reliable people in the village, and we'd become good friends since we started working together at the clinic. Even though I barely had more training than her, she never once complained about being my assistant. In fact, I think she was relieved. She might have run screaming if the clinic was suddenly handed over to her.
Good luck,
she added.
You too. Thanks.
I made my way to the gate, then threw it into the desert, before realizing I had no idea where this camp would be set up. What if I'd misunderstood, and they'd set up camp beyond the barrier? No. If the chieftain was sending messengers, they'd have to be inside the barrier, but that still could be anywhere within a several-mile radius of the village. I stopped and looked around. It made sense that they wouldn't circle halfway around the village before going off to their camp. Odds were it was a straight shot from the gate if I was careful. So, following that logic, I walked for several minutes in the straightest line I could manage. After a while, I found myself just short of the barrier, stopping next to one of the markers staked deeply into the sand. I looked around in all directions, but didn't see anything at all. No smoke was rising, no raucous yelling, no visible tracks from their vehicles. I sat down in the sand, looking down at my feet. Way to go, Taylor. Step 1 of your big plan is such a great success. It's surely a great omen of what's to come. I was embarrassed, to put it lightly, so I wasn't about to show my face to Kara or my mother again so soon. Where could they be? Is it possible they lied about being nearby to intimidate the rebels into behaving? A bluff? I placed my hands on top of my head, racking my brain. After an hour of this, I'd finally accepted defeat. Maybe if I got back early enough, I could think of a way to pry the information from the chieftain. Maybe I could tell him I had information about the rebels and wanted to go personally. No, it could work. But more than likely, he'd insist on sending his own messengers, or he'd demand I tell him first and then, what? I'd have to make something up or be punished myself. Going to see the chieftain was riskier than just walking into the PanTech camp. Maybe I could just ask around and see if any of the villagers saw them while out hunting, or saw what direction they went in when they left. Maybe. I could really go for a definitely right now. I only made it about 10 steps back in the direction of the village when a gust of wind came bearing a gift. Now, that was an odd smell. A good smell. A PanTech breakfast, no doubt, or what was left of it. I turned and traveled in the direction it came from, and did not make it far before a tent came into sight. As I got even closer, I could hear talking. When I got within shouting distance, I heard a chirping sound, and the talking ceased. A moment later, 5 soldiers were stepping out of the camp to meet me. Each one had their rifle pointed at me, their expressions unreadable at this distance, but I'm sure well within range to kill me. I said, before clearing my throat and raising my voice to a shout to be sure they heard me.
Our welcome guests?
I continued.
I'm here to see Linus, if that's all right.
I offered the biggest, friendliest smile a 17-year-old girl could offer, with 5 rifles aimed at her head. If you're enjoying F. Lockhaven's audio content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.